DreAllDay.com.
Congratulate yourself for tuning into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, there's more. You get a huge dose of personal initiative. This is the go-getter energy that moves you to make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. Putting all this together, you get the mindset, the method, the podcast known as Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day. Welcome to the show. Today's topic is appreciating the power of cultivation. I was reading a book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. If you haven't read that book, you should read it. Any book that I mention on the show, you should read it. But Jeff Olson talks about how it used to be, back in the day, and when I say back in the day, I'm talking about pre-smartphones, pre the device that you're listening to this podcast on. It used to be that we all understood inherently the whole concept of plant, time, harvest. Everybody get that? You plant some seeds, you put some time in so nature can do its work, and then you harvest. Then you get whatever that seed was. You plant an apple tree, put some time, let some time go by so nature can do its thing, and eventually you get some apples. You plant some corn, let some time go by, you get some corn, whatever it is. I mean, it's differing amounts of time depending on what you plant, but there's always some time that needs to be put in before you can harvest a result. And I want you to understand that I'm not talking about farming here, okay? This is not a farming podcast. I'm a city guy. This is about putting in a certain amount of work, understanding that a certain amount of time has to go by before you get the result. It used to be, back in the day, we all understood this and we all lived it. We didn't complain about it. We didn't ask how we can hack the system. We didn't ask, do we really have to allow this much time to go by before we get the result? We never asked those questions and we never looked for those shortcuts simply because we inherently understood that this is the way that it goes. But nowadays, a lot of people are moving into a different mindset where we eliminate the time and now it's just plant, harvest. Step one, do some work. Step two, we want the result. And if we don't get the result, we're not willing to stick around and wait for it. We're not willing to put any time in between the effort and the result. We're not willing to listen to somebody telling us that, you guys still got to put time into that equation. That's why this podcast ain't for everybody. This is not something that everybody's going to appreciate even if they understand it. See, some people can hear something and completely appreciate it and agree, but still they don't want to hear it. Still they don't want to apply it. Still they don't want to hear any more of it. That's why, again, this ain't for everybody. Nowadays, many of us have moved into this plant, step one, harvest, step two mindset. Simple idea, and simple ideas receive very little appreciation. But it's the simple stuff that creates success. And that's why every day when I introduce this show, what do we start with? Discipline, which is your ability to, again, show up day after day and do the work. Everybody already understands that if you're going to be good at anything, if you're going to be a pro, if you're going to get paid for something, you got to show up consistently and you got to perform consistently. Everybody knows that, but does everybody do it? Most of you go to work, or you play a sport, or you're on a team. Most of you are part of some type of group outside of your family, some kind of group, whether that's a work group, a sports group, a volunteer group, some kind of group. All right, how many people in your group, or what percentage of people in your group show up every single time and actually do what they're supposed to do every single time? I would guess that most of you couldn't say any number over 50%. So this whole discipline thing, everybody understands it, but how many people actually apply it? See, it's a simple thing. Confidence could be a little bit trickier. All right? Confidence is a little bit harder for people to deal with because it's going in that positive direction. It's easy for people to deal with the stuff that goes in a negative direction because it's just human nature. Confidence can be a little bit trickier, but that's why I always reduce it back to confidence comes from discipline. And mental toughness, simple thing. The results aren't coming. You keep doing what you're supposed to do, even though the results didn't come. Even though you did everything right, even though you followed the process. See, these simple things, these are the things that create success. So when you start to think too much, you try to outsmart yourself, you try to outsmart the process, you ask yourself, why do I got to put all this time in to get the result? I remember posting a video on YouTube, what year was this? Maybe 2008, early 2009. I did a few dribbling drills. The video took literally 1 minute. And I said, any player who wants to get good at dribbling a basketball, just do these drills that I just showed you every day for 5 years and you'll be good at dribbling a basketball. And a bunch of the comments asked one question: do I really have to do it for 5 years? How long is this really going to take? Or people would ask me who hadn't seen that video, they would just ask me randomly, how long do I need to work on my ball handling to be good at it? Or how long do I need to work on my fill in the blank, name any other basketball skill, excuse me, in order to be good at it? A lot of people would ask this because they don't want to deal with this time part of the equation. But today's topic, again, is appreciating the power of cultivation. You're going to appreciate the fact that time is still part of the equation, despite the fact that we can get things, a lot of things at our fingertips today. We can get a lot of information. We can get access to people. We can get entertainment. We can get whatever we want to use to waste time. It's all available at our fingertips today. But I want you to understand one thing that is not available at our fingertips just at the push of a button. Still, it wasn't back then, and it ain't now, and it's not going to be tomorrow. Results, success, however you define the word, is not at your fingertips. It's not just download a different app and all of a sudden it'll be there for you. That's not how it works. So today's episode is really about, as many episodes are, it's about the discipline of understanding that there is a process that must be followed. Whether you want to follow it or not, if you're going to reach success, you ain't got no choice but to follow it. So let's get into it. Point number one. Topic again today is appreciating the power of cultivation. Definition of cultivation is the process of trying to develop or acquire. Once more. Cultivation, the process of trying to develop or acquire. Key word in that definition. Anybody know what it is? Anybody? Bueller? Process. Definition of process, stay with me here, is a series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. These definitions bring us back to our favorite work on your game element of discipline, which I talked about already. Respecting the cultivation process, ladies and gentlemen, and not growing impatient when things don't happen overnight and or when steps don't happen easy and smooth. That all goes back to discipline. You're trying to develop or acquire something, whether that be a skill or a certain outcome or whatever you're going after. That's the cultivation. But there's a process to it, which means there's a series of actions or steps that you take in order to achieve that outcome. But just because, this is what many people need to understand, and I'm sure some people who are listening to this right now need to understand, just because you have a process, and I don't care where that process came, could have came from a very reliable source, could have come from someone who has already achieved the outcome. They've been through the cultivation, the development or acquiring that you're after, they already developed and they have already acquired, past tense, or they've done it already, and they gave you their process. This is exactly what I did. These are the exact steps that I took. This is exactly how it's done. They gave you a process that they consider guaranteed to work. And you're following that process. You're taking, definition of process, actions or steps in order to achieve a particular end, but it's not working. You're following their process. It already worked. You've seen their success. You believe that they're not bullshitting you. You invested in this process and it's not working yet. Do you have the discipline to stick to the process? That's a simple question right there. And someone's ability, not their ability, actually someone's answer to that question will tell you a whole lot about where they're going, where they've been, and where they are. Should I ask that question one more time? Because I think some of you weren't listening. You have a process. I don't care where you got the process from. It could have been from the most reliable source that you could find. This process, guaranteed to work, at least as far as you believe. Series of actions or steps in order to achieve a particular end, and the process isn't working. You're taking the steps. You are doing the actions. You are doing the work. You're working on your game. You have not gotten the results. You watched the YouTube video that Dre Baldwin put out. It said, do these drills every day for 5 years. You did them every day for 5 years, and you still can't dribble. Are you going to stick to the process? Will you stick to the cultivation mindset? Or, here's what most people do. Do you throw away the process and say, obviously that process doesn't work? Do you throw away the process and say, obviously, there's nothing wrong with the process, but there's something wrong with me? Do you throw away the process and say, I don't want to do it for 5 years. How can I do this in 1 year? That's not necessarily a bad question, depending on what you're asking it about. But understand that there is no hack to achievement. not long-lasting achievement in this process of plant, time, and harvest. That's a 3-step process. You can't rejigger that process. Do you have the discipline to stick to the cultivation process and not grow impatient when things don't happen the way that you expected them to, or as easily / smoothly as you expected them to? That's a rhetorical question. I'm gonna just let hang in the air for you as we move on to point number 2. Today's topic is appreciating the power of cultivation. But you may interject by asking a question right here. Maybe you're already thinking it in your mind. Maybe you're saying, Dre, that's all fine and good, what you said in point number 1, but here it is. Dre, how do I know that I have the right process? How do I know that I'm taking the right steps? How do I know that this process that I'm about to follow, how do I know that this is the right one before I put my resources into it? Somebody will come to me and say, Dre, before I sign up for the Bulletproof Mindset course, can you show me a little bit of the course so that I know it's good before I invest money in it? Or, before I buy the book, The Super You, for $15, can you show me a little bit of what's in the book? Or before I fill in the blank, whatever someone's going to invest in. It doesn't have to be money. Before I invest time into something, before I invest my energy into something, can you show me in some way, shape, or form that this is guaranteed to produce results? And I'm going to tell y'all something right now. And many of you are salespeople. If you have a person come to you asking something like that, can you show me that this is guaranteed to work? Can you show me this is absolutely going to produce a result before I make an investment into it? 9 times out of 10, and I've been selling stuff online for over 10 years, my experience tells me usually that person's bullshitting. They're not a customer. You don't even want to invest your time into them, because even if they buy from you, they're going to be the biggest headache that won't even be worth the money that you got from them. That's a side note. But anyway, let's get back to our point. So I'm going to ask, how do I know I have the right process or steps before I put all these resources into it? Before, Dre, I do these drills every day for 5 years. How can you guarantee me that this is going to make me good at dribbling the basketball? Before, Mr. Online Course Salesperson, before I buy your online course, how can you guarantee me that this is going to produce the skill or the result or the outcome that I want to get before I give you my money? Or before I follow your process that you're putting out for free, it's going to take me 30 days. How do I know that it's going to work? This is a good question. This is a legitimate question. I'm not saying it's a bullshit. It's a legitimate question. This is where you find a mentor or a coach. The difference between a mentor and a coach. A mentor is a more informal and loose type of relationship, meaning you talk to them whenever you can. They share whatever they want to share. It's more of a loose relationship. And a coach is a more structured thing. There's a structure to how you connect with that person, how they're working with you, and you get specific on the certain types of outcomes that you're getting. That's why the game group membership that I talk about here on the show every day is me being your personal coach, but without the one-on-one. But it's me being your personal coach because it's structured and we get specific into outcomes. That's why I say discipline into strategies, into results. Mentor could be, listen to this podcast. I can be a virtual mentor to you. It's informal, meaning I'm not speaking directly to your specific situation. Maybe I am. I'm sure I got a couple episodes where I spoke specific to something that you've been dealing with or going through or thinking about. But I'm not doing it because I knew that you were going through it. It's just something that I came up with. I know it's a topic people have challenges with. So it's more informal and it's more loose. That's what a mentor is. You can be mentored by somebody by just listening to their show or watching their YouTube or reading their books. If you want to be coached by somebody, then they got to know they're coaching you. Now, you understand what I'm saying? You need excuse me again. You need a person who has the knowledge or the experience to actually help you. And if you don't have either, because I got to make sure I cover all the contingencies here, folks. If you don't have a person who has the knowledge, they don't have the experience, you can't find a mentor, you can't afford a coach, you still don't have an excuse. Because at that point, you utilize your time and your energy to trial and error your way through figuring things out. But these days, listen, that I don't even need to add that contingency. I didn't even need to add that contingency simply because these days, nobody here can say they can't find a mentor. If you listen to this podcast, you can't say you can't find a mentor. You know how to use the podcast app. You know how to use the smartphone. You can find somebody who has some knowledge, some information. you can piece together different pieces from different people and figure something out, at least something that you can try to see what works and what doesn't work. So anybody here can find a mentor these days. That's easy. Now, investing in the coach is a whole different conversation, and we'll talk about that in a different topic. You just listen to my episode on the 5 forms of investment: time, money, attention, energy, focus, episode number 609 of the Work on Your Game podcast. These days, theoretically, there are many people out there who are willing to share and be your mentor. Can we agree? There are many people who will make a video or start a podcast and be a mentor to people because it's available. Anybody can do it. Maybe you got a podcast, but only a few people actually know what they're talking about. Just because somebody turns a mic on, or they got a nice video production team, or they had a nice studio set up whenever you watch their YouTube, or their books are well edited, doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. So that's where your skill of discernment comes in, and deciding who actually knows what they're talking about and who's just talking but they don't know what they're talking about. But again, that's also a different topic for a different day. Probably already talked about it before. You can see the full archive of this podcast at dreallday.com/podcast. Moving on to point number 3. Today's topic is appreciating the power of cultivation. Understand that sometimes you got to stop watching the scoreboard and just do your damn job. This is a really important key, because in life, especially when we're following someone else's process for something that's important to us, some outcome that we really want to be good in. For the example that I use, the basketball player who wants to be good at dribbling in basketball, it means a lot to them because they want to be somebody in basketball. Maybe they want to make their team in high school, want to get recruited to college, want to play pro. It's important that this process actually produces a result, because it's important that they become better at the game, right? At the same time that it's important that you produce a certain result, while you're in this time phase. So we know that you plant, then you give time, then you harvest, right? So when you're in this process of time, which may take way longer than both the planting and the harvesting put together times 10, could take even longer than that. So understanding that when you're in this time process, sometimes you got to just stop looking at the crops and asking, when the hell is the apple tree going to grow? When the hell is the corn going to come out? Instead of asking yourself, when am I going to get the result? Because you're just staring at the crops and the dirt that hasn't produced anything yet. Maybe you just need to put your head down and do your damn job, whatever that job happens to be. Meaning you got to develop tunnel vision for doing the work, whatever the work is, that planting part. See, just because you planted some seeds on this little part of your farm doesn't mean that the rest of the farm doesn't need to be tended to. So while you're allowing time to do its job on those seeds that you planted yesterday, today you can plant some seeds somewhere else. And just to make sure I'm not losing anybody, I'm not talking about farming here. Now, if you made 10 phone calls, cold calls for your business yesterday, that doesn't mean you sit around and stare at the phone and wonder when you're going to get an incoming call from one of those 10 people who you left voicemails for yesterday. It means while you're waiting for those calls to cultivate, while you're waiting for that time to go by and harvest those calls you made yesterday, maybe they will harvest, maybe they won't. Maybe the birds got to those seeds. Who knows? You need to be making 10 more calls. You need to be planting more seeds. The more seeds you plant, the more opportunity you give yourself to have a harvest. So this is a contingency that wasn't even in my notes, so I make sure I put this in here. Just because you plant seeds does not mean you're going to grow a tree. Doesn't mean you're going to have a harvest. Doesn't mean you're going to have a great Thanksgiving. Just because you plant it does not mean something's going to grow. So I want to make sure that I said that so nobody can act surprised if and when this happens. Actually, when it happens, because everyone here, if you have enough experience in your professional life, you know just because you did the work does not mean you're going to get the result every time. All right, nobody here is batting 1,000. This is just the way that life works. Now, it may seem, again, what did we talk about yesterday? Comparing ourselves to where everybody else is. So just because it looks like somebody else is batting 1,000, you don't know what you don't know about that person. We're not looking to our left and our right. We're looking in the mirror. We're looking at ourselves, looking at our own work. Tunnel vision on your work means stop measuring the results of every single move that you take. Stop comparing your process to everyone else every 3 days. Stop wondering when whatever it is, when that's going to happen for you, and just do what you've committed yourself to doing. If that means making 10 calls a day, make 10 calls a day. If you keep making 10 calls a day every day, eventually somebody's going to start calling you back. Okay? Don't mean everybody's going to call back. Doesn't mean they all going to be happy to have heard from you, but somebody's going to call back if you do it every single day. Now, if you make 10 calls and then you just sit there and wonder when's the result going to come, maybe nobody's going to call you back. If you plant 10 seeds, eventually a tree's gonna grow somewhere in there. If you got a big enough plot of land, eventually some sapling is gonna come out of it. That's what they call a young tree, right? A sapling, I think that's what they call it. I told you, I'm a city guy. I'm from concrete jungles. But anyway, y'all get the point that I'm making here. While your head is down, doing the work, things, those outside elements, that mother nature that happens during time, they will collude to start working in your favor while you're over doing something else somewhere else, because you're giving those other elements that have nothing to do with you, you're giving them time to do their thing. You know, the saying is that a watch pot doesn't boil. Now, we know this isn't quite true. Any of you ever watched the pot boil? It will boil if you turn the heat up high enough and you stand there and stare at it. It will boil. But the problem is it's boring to watch a pot boil. You're wasting your time watching the pot boil, because the pot's gonna boil whether you watch it or not. See, what you need to be doing while the pot is boiling is get the rest of the meal ready while that water is heating up. See, you watching the pot is not gonna make it boil any faster. That's already taken care of. So you need to go take care of everything else while the process processes. You follow me? So I remember whenever I move into an apartment, I don't know how it is in different cities, I move into an apartment or a condo in Miami, and I'm calling the management office at the new place. Every day I'm calling them, I'm like, yo, what the hell is the hold up? Why ain't nobody called me back yet? I sent in all this paperwork and I'm impatient. And the woman in management is telling me like, Dre, we have a process. This person got to sign this. This has to happen. We got to send this to this person that comes back. I don't know why it takes 3 weeks to move into an apartment, but it's a great metaphor for life. Okay, even though I don't like that process, it is a great metaphor for life. There is a certain process to achievement that we all have to accept. That there's certain things you do up front, then you gotta let some time go by while everyone else does their part, then you get the result. And just in case that result doesn't come because somebody messed up along the way, might be one of those people in the middle, might be one of the elements in the middle, maybe it was just bad luck, maybe you fucked up at the beginning and the way that you did your work and the way that you planted those seeds, they weren't deep enough, maybe they didn't get enough sun, maybe you didn't water them enough, maybe some birds came and stole the seed when you weren't looking. We don't know. If you don't get the result, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with the process, it just means you got to keep working the process. So if you work the process often enough in enough different places, eventually it's going to start working in some places, but most people just don't have the discipline to keep doing it. Question is, do you? Let's recap today's topic, which is appreciating the power of cultivation. An idea that I thought of while reading the book, The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. If you haven't read that book, since I'm mentioning it, you should know already that you need to read it. It used to be that we understood inherently there was a process. You would plant seeds, let time do its job, and then you would have a harvest. Nowadays, many people expect to plant seeds, and then they turn back around and there's a harvest. A simple idea. Simple ideas receive very little appreciation, but it's a simple that creates success. So let's get into our points. Number one, definition of cultivation is the process of trying to develop or acquire. The key word in that definition is process. What's the definition of process? A series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. These definitions lead to what? First keyword you hear in introduction to every single episode of this show, which is what? Everybody at the same time, discipline. Respecting the cultivation process and not growing impatient when things don't happen as quickly or as easily as you expected. Point number two, however, you may ask, how do I know I have the right process or steps in place before I put all my resources into following a process? What if I got the wrong process? Well, this is where you can find a mentor or a coach who has the knowledge and experience to help you. And if you don't have either, utilize your time and energy, and you can trial and error your way into figuring it out. Right? You don't have any excuses. These days, you don't even have to do that because there's so many mentors out there available to you that you actually need to go the opposite way. You need to use your skill of discernment to filter through and narrow down who actually knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. And I've given you a whole episode on understanding how you know somebody knows what they're talking about and how they don't. It's called Choosing Your Mentors. Go to dreallday.com/podcast, go to the archive, and just use the search function in your browser. You can find that episode. Point number three, sometimes you just gotta stop watching the scoreboard and just do your damn job. Tunnel vision on your work, meaning you gotta stop measuring the results of every single move and asking yourself, okay, when's the great windfall of money or all the great success or my great ball handling skill? When is it gonna happen? Because you're looking at it every single day. Stop comparing your progress to everybody else every 3 days. Stop wondering when it, quote unquote, is gonna happen, and just do what you committed yourself to. Things will eventually start working in your favor if you're doing the work consistently. They say that a watch pot doesn't boil, which is actually not true, but it's boring to watch a pot boil. While the pot is boiling, if you're watching it, that means you know what you're not doing? You're not getting the rest of the meal ready while the water is boiling. You watching that pot boil won't make it boil any faster. That's already taken care of. Go take care of everything else while the process processes. Now let's talk about what's going on in the game group. Game group, 3 words to remember. The discipline to create the strategies and implement the strategies that produce a result. They all work together here. And what we're talking about here today, cultivation, this is a perfect example of what we do in the game group. Not the episode itself, but appreciating the fact that there is a cultivation process to producing results. So just because you did X does not mean Y is going to happen the next day or the day after that or even 30 days later. You have to stick to the process, whatever it may be, however long it may take. Many people just simply don't have that discipline. But I created the game group to help people get that discipline, get their discipline in the space that it needs to be. And if you can listen to this podcast, you can get value from the game group. And that's all the information on the game group, what we offer, what you get, all of that is at Dre All Day. And some testimonials, a bunch of more testimonials than you even thought you needed from people who have been through my process in one way or another as a individual client or the game group or somewhere else. You can get those all at dreallday.com/game group. Work on your game. dreallday.com.